The Seven Sisters and the Outlaw. Leave a like and write in the comments which part of the world you're listening to this story from. Let's begin. The outlaw arrived in Ash River at dusk, when the sun bled into the dust and every shadow learned how to lie. His name was Caleb Crow, and the law had chased it across 3 territories, carving it into posters that never quite matched his face. He rode alone, not because he trusted no one, but because anyone who stayed close to him for too long tended to disappear. Horses went lame. Camps burned. Men woke screaming at nothing. Caleb had stopped asking why years ago. The town watched him arrive with the practiced stillness of people who knew better than to stare too long at trouble. It was the undertaker who spoke first. "You're late," the old man said, leaning in the doorway of his shop. Caleb frowned. Late for what? The undertaker's eyes drifted past him, toward the western hills, for leaving. That was the first time Caleb heard about the sisters. 7 women lived beyond the Ash River bend, where the land turned sour and crops refused to grow straight. They owned no livestock, yet their smokehouses were always full. No one remembered seeing them buy supplies, yet they never lacked for anything. Travelers who passed too close to their land felt watched, counted, weighed, and sometimes they were. The sisters were never seen apart. They walked the edge of town together once every month, always at dawn, dressed in black and grey, their faces calm, their eyes reflecting nothing. People swore that if you counted them twice, the number changed. 6, 7, 8, then 7 again. Their names were known, but never spoken aloud in sequence. Folks believed saying them in order invited something to listen. Caleb laughed when he heard the stories. That night, he dreamed of women standing in a circle, their backs to a fire that burned without light. One of them turned and looked at him, not angry, not afraid, just tired. "You finally crossed the right line," she said. Caleb woke with the taste of iron in his mouth and the certainty that something had marked him. By morning, his horse refused to cross the Ash River. No amount of kicking or coaxing would move the animal forward. It reared, panicked, eyes rolling white, until Caleb dismounted and let it go. The horse bolted back toward town, leaving him alone on the wrong side of the river. That was when he saw them. 7 figures stood on the far bank, motionless, watching him with patient attention. The wind shifted, carrying a sound that was not quite a song and not quite a whisper. It felt like being counted, and Caleb Crow understood, too late, that he had not found the sisters by accident. They had been waiting for him. Caleb Crow did not move at first. The 7 women across the river remained perfectly still, their silhouettes sharp against the pale morning light. The Ash River flowed between them, dark and slow, its surface unbroken by ripples, as if it too were listening. Caleb felt the weight of their attention settle on him, not like a threat, but like an assessment already underway. He raised a hand slightly, unsure whether he meant it as greeting or warning. None of them responded. The sound returned, soft, rhythmic, almost melodic. It was not a song meant to be heard, but one meant to be felt, vibrating faintly in his bones. Caleb had crossed battlefields under cannon fire and stared down men with murder in their eyes, yet this quiet unsettled him more than any gun ever had. "You ladies planning to speak," he called out, his voice rough, "or just stand there judging me?" One of them stepped forward. She was tall, dressed in a dark traveling coat worn thin at the elbows. Her hair was bound tightly at the nape of her neck, streaked with grey despite her steady posture. When she spoke, her voice carried across the river without effort. "You crossed into our keeping," she said. "That is enough." Caleb scoffed, though his pulse quickened. "Didn't see a sign?" Another woman moved beside her, shorter, broader in the shoulders, her eyes sharp as flint. "Men like you never do." Caleb glanced downriver, then upriver, calculating distance, escape, options. The land offered none. The river curved unnaturally here, hemming him in with its banks. Even the trees leaned inward, their branches twisted like hands half closed. "What do you want?" Caleb asked. A third sister spoke, her voice softer, but no less firm. "We want what you carry." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I don't carry anything that belongs to you." The fourth sister tilted her head slightly, studying him with unsettling precision. "You carry unfinished deaths," she said, "and unfinished deaths are loud." The words struck deeper than Caleb expected. Images flickered in his mind, faces he had left behind, not always by the gun, but by choice. A man locked in a burning barn, a boy abandoned in the desert with no water, a woman crying in a doorway he never turned back to look at. Caleb swallowed. "That's between me and God." The fifth sister smiled faintly, without warmth. "God does not walk this land anymore." The sixth sister raised her hand, and the sound ceased instantly. The silence that followed pressed in, thick and deliberate. "We are not judges," she said. "We are caretakers." The seventh sister, youngest, pale, with eyes far too old for her face, looked directly at Caleb. "And you are late." The river shifted, not flowing faster, not swelling, simply changing direction, as if the water itself had decided Caleb no longer belonged on the far bank. Before he could react, the current pulled at his boots, dragging him forward. He stumbled, fighting instinctively, but the river did not fight him back. It guided him. Caleb fell to one knee in the shallow water, gasping as cold seeped into his bones. When he looked up again, the sisters were no longer across the river. They were standing beside him. No footprints marked how they had crossed. The tallest sister extended her hand, not in kindness, not in threat, but in inevitability. "You will come with us," she said. "You will stay until what follows you is finished." Caleb stared at her hand, every instinct screaming to run, to fight, to refuse. But the land had gone quiet in a way that left no room for argument. Slowly, he took her hand. The moment his fingers closed around hers, the wind rose sharply, carrying with it a low, distant sound, hoofbeats that did not belong to any living horse. Somewhere behind Caleb Crow, something began to follow again. And this time, it was not alone. They led Caleb Crow away from the river without a word. The land shifted as they walked, subtly but unmistakably. Paths appeared where none had existed moments before, worn smooth by footsteps that left no tracks. The air grew cooler with every step, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and ash, as though something long buried had recently exhaled. Caleb tried to count the sisters as they moved ahead of him. Once, 7. Again, 6. Then, impossibly, 7 again. He stopped trying. The ranch emerged from the land, the way a memory surfaces in the mind, sudden, fully formed, and undeniable. It was not large, but it felt immense, anchored deep into the soil. The wood was dark with age, etched by symbols that looked less carved than grown. A single lantern burned on the porch, its flame steady despite the wind. "This place doesn't feel right," Caleb muttered. "That is because it is honest," one of the sisters replied. He was no longer sure which one had spoken. Inside, the house was warmer than expected. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting shadows that moved a fraction of a second too late. Along the walls hung objects that made Caleb's stomach tighten, coats, hats, holsters, all worn thin by use. Each carried the quiet weight of a life interrupted. "Who did those belong to?" Caleb asked. "To men who ran," said another sister. "And to men who returned." They guided him to a long wooden table at the center of the room. 7 chairs stood around it. One, at the far end, remained empty. Caleb hesitated. "I'm not sitting." "You already are," said the youngest sister. Caleb looked down. He was seated. The realization sent a chill through him deeper than any fear. He had not felt himself move. The chair beneath him was solid, real, yet it felt as though the decision had been made long before he arrived. The eldest sister stepped forward and placed a weathered ledger on the table. She opened it carefully, as if the pages might resist. "Your name is already here," she said. Caleb leaned forward despite himself. There it was, Caleb Crow, written in a firm, deliberate hand. Beneath it, a list, dates, places, short descriptions that needed no embellishment. He recognized every one. "I didn't mean for some of those to happen," he said quietly. "No one ever does," another sister replied. The fire flared suddenly, and the room seemed to stretch, its walls pulling back just enough to reveal darkness beyond. From that darkness came a sound Caleb had heard before, hoofbeats, slow and deliberate, circling the house. "It has found you again," said the third sister. Caleb clenched his fists. "What is it?" The sisters exchanged glances that carried centuries of shared understanding. "It is the sum of what men leave unfinished," the eldest said. "It wears many shapes. Sometimes it hunts, sometimes it waits, but it always collects." "And you?" Caleb asked. "What are you to it?" "We are the delay," said the fourth sister, "the boundary." The youngest looked at Caleb with unsettling calm. "And you are the reckoning it has been waiting for." The hoofbeats stopped. Something heavy pressed against the outer walls of the house. Not striking, not forcing entry, only testing, like a hand against a door already known to be locked. The lantern flickered. "If I stay," Caleb said slowly, "what happens to me?" The eldest sister met his gaze. "You will face what follows you," she said, "and the land will decide what remains." Caleb exhaled, a long, measured breath. For the first time in years, there was nowhere left to run and no road behind him worth returning to. "Then let's not keep it waiting," he said. Outside, the wind howled across the plains, and the thing that had followed Caleb Crow across territories and blood-soaked miles began to move closer, drawn not by fear, but by permission. The sisters did not rush. That, more than anything else, unsettled Caleb Crow. Men who hunted him had always hurried, guns drawn too quickly, voices raised too fast, fear leaking through their bravado. Even the thing that followed him across counties had shown impatience at times, pressing closer when blood was fresh. But the seven sisters moved with the certainty of those who knew time was not on their side, but on theirs. They rose from the table together. The empty chair at the far end scraped softly across the floor, moving on its own, aligning itself precisely with the others. Caleb felt a pressure at his back, urging him to stand. This time, he felt himself move. "Follow," said the eldest sister. They led him through a narrow door at the back of the house, down a set of stairs cut directly into the earth. The air grew colder with every step. The walls were packed soil reinforced with dark beams, each beam etched with the same symbols Caleb had seen in the ledger. Some symbols were fresh, others were worn nearly smooth by time. "How long have you been doing this?" Caleb asked. "Longer than this land has had a name," one sister answered. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage opened into a wide underground chamber. The ceiling was supported by stone pillars shaped by hand, not tool. At the center of the chamber lay a circular depression filled with ash, bone fragments, and objects Caleb recognized immediately as personal effects: rings, bullets, buttons, broken watches. The sisters formed a ring around it. "This is where it will come," said the second sister. Caleb's jaw tightened. "And what do I do?" The youngest sister stepped forward, holding a small object in her palm. It was a simple iron token, cold and heavy, etched with Caleb's name. "You remember?" she said. out loud. The chamber trembled. From somewhere above, the sound returned, hoofbeats, slow and deliberate, echoing through stone and earth. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air thickened, carrying with it the smell of old blood and scorched wood. Caleb felt the weight settle into his chest again, but this time it did not force him down. It held him upright. He stepped forward to the edge of the circle. "I left a man in a barn," Caleb said, his voice rough, "locked the door, told myself he'd find a way out." The ash stirred. "I took money meant for a family and spent it on bullets instead." The chamber darkened. "I rode away when I could have stayed. I stayed when I should have stopped." With every admission, the air shifted, the ground responding not with judgment, but with attention. The hoofbeats grew closer. From the far end of the chamber, darkness gathered into form, not a body, but a distortion, a presence that bent the space around it. The temperature dropped sharply. Caleb could feel the thing's focus lock onto him. "This one is mine," the presence said, its voice layered, echoing with others beneath it. The eldest sister did not turn. "Not yet." Caleb forced himself to keep speaking. "I knew what I was doing," he said, "and I did it anyway." The presence recoiled slightly, as if the words carried weight it did not expect. The sisters began to chant, not loudly, not melodically, but in measured tones, each voice distinct, interlocking with the others. The symbols along the walls pulsed faintly, glowing like embers beneath ash. "What you name cannot hunt you unseen," the youngest sister said. The presence surged forward, testing the boundary of the circle. The ground cracked but held. Caleb felt something loosen inside him, a knot he had carried so long he no longer remembered forming it. For the first time, the thing hesitated, and hesitation, Caleb realized, was the first sign that it could be denied. Outside the chamber, the wind screamed across the plains. Below the ranch, beneath the land that had waited so long, the reckoning began, not with violence, but with truth spoken into the dark. The presence advanced no farther. It hovered at the edge of the circle, its shape unstable, as if the words spoken had begun to unthread it. The chamber vibrated with a low resonance, not a threat, but a pressure, like the moment before a decision hardens into permanence. Caleb Crow felt the heat of the ash beneath his boots seep upward, not burning, but grounding him. For the first time in his life, he did not feel chased. He felt held in place. "You cannot take him," the eldest sister said calmly. "He has named himself." The presence shifted, its voice fracturing. "He belongs to the road," it hissed, "to what he left behind." "And what he left behind has been spoken," replied another sister. "That is the boundary." The chanting deepened. Each sister's voice carried a different cadence, a different memory. Caleb sensed their history layered into the sound, loss after loss, each bound deliberately so the land would not forget. This was not punishment. It was containment. The presence lunged again, testing the circle with greater force. The ground cracked along the perimeter, stones grinding against each other, but the symbols flared brighter, holding fast. Caleb's breath came steady now. He understood what was being asked of him, not his life, but his stillness. Running had fed the thing, naming had weakened it, remaining would finish the work. "I won't leave," Caleb said aloud. "Not this time." The presence recoiled sharply, its outline shuddering as if struck. "Then you will end," it said. "Yes," Caleb replied, "but you won't follow." Silence fell, not the listening silence of before, but a deeper one, heavy and absolute. The chanting stopped. The symbols dimmed. The chamber waited. The presence collapsed inward, folding into itself, its voice dissolving into a sound like wind rushing through empty halls. Then it sank, drawn downward into the ash and bone, absorbed by the land that had long prepared for its return. The ground stilled. No hoofbeats followed. The sisters remained motionless, eyes closed, as if listening for something that never came. When the eldest finally opened her eyes, they were clear, unburdened. "It is finished," she said. Caleb felt the weight lift. Not relief, not forgiveness, but an ending clean enough to rest upon. He looked at the sisters, one by one, seeing not wardens now, but women who had carried an impossible task longer than any should have had to. "What happens to me?" he asked quietly. The youngest sister stepped forward. "You stay," she said, "not as a prisoner, as proof." Caleb nodded. He had already accepted it. They led him back up the stairs into the morning light. The ranch stood quiet, solid, unchanged. The wind moved gently through the grass. Somewhere far off, a bird called once, then again. Days passed, then weeks. Caleb worked the land beside the sisters. He fixed fences that no longer shifted. He drew water that no longer tasted of iron. At night, the singing did not return. The silence that settled over the ranch was not watchful anymore. It was peaceful. Travelers stopped seeing the ranch altogether, their paths bending away without conscious choice. The wanted posters faded, then disappeared. Caleb Crow became a man without a road behind him and no need for one ahead. The 7 sisters aged slowly and evenly, their burden finally shared with the land itself. One by one, when their time came, they were buried beneath the ranch, names spoken, lives recorded, voices released. When the last sister passed, the land did not tremble, it exhaled. The ranch weathered, then softened, then returned to earth. Grass covered the stones, wind erased the paths. And beneath it all, the thing that had once hunted men remained bound, not by force, but by truth fully spoken and finally held. Somewhere, long after, when men chose to stop running and speak what followed them, the land listened quietly, not to judge, not to claim, but to remember that once, 7 sisters and 1 outlaw taught it how to rest.